Well, hello everyone. We've had a shift of our venue. We were going to do Facebook Live, ran into some technical difficulties. So we do the next best thing and shift. We will not let anything stop anything that we're doing tonight. So, welcome. My name is Dr. Marilyn Pendleton, and I am your host and of my podcast, which is Your Voice Heard with Dr. Marilyn Pendleton. And a lot of people don't realize that there is hope and happiness after grief. And Your Voice Heard, our vision is to heal, inspire, educate, and empower. Now, are you navigating a sudden life change or loss, a job loss, a betrayal, a death, miscarriage, divorce, foreclosure, or any other type of loss? Well, thank you for joining me tonight in this conversation with Lois Hall. Now, I am a certified grief recovery method specialist, and Lois Hall is also, but she is an advanced grief recovery method specialist, and she will tell you what that means. She is also the founder of Starfish Associates. Now, feel free to ask any questions. You can just drop them in the chat. Jalea Moody is the Your Voice Heard artistic specialist. She is going to look out for the questions as well as Lois. I'll do my best, but we're working here as a team. So let's get started. I'm going to put on my glasses to tell you this part. Now, a little about my guest, Lois Hall. I consider Lois a friend, an invaluable resource, but also as a mentor. Now, I got certified as a grief recovery method specialist in 2008, and I connected with Lois around 2012. She was the first person that told me about Folletti's study about adverse experiences. And so she consistently supports me in my endeavors related to grief and public health. So let's get started. I'm going to give you her abbreviated bio. This is just a snapshot of Lois Hall. Lois Hall's career has been in the field of public health, having held several positions with the Ohio Department of Health and serving as the executive director of the Ohio Public Health Association, working with those going through HIV, AIDS, cancer, and other diseases, their families and loved ones. Lois' interest in grief began from that perspective. Meeting John W. James during that time changed Lois's life and her career trajectory. Lois was trained as a grief recovery method specialist by John James, the founder of the grief recovery method. In 1998, she began providing community programs at that time. In 2001, she was invited to become a Grief Recovery Institute trainer. In 2016, Lois began assisting and providing technical assistance to specialists across the U.S., including me, and helping with various quality assurance improvement projects, research activities, and other projects as assigned. She joined the ranks of the advanced specialists in 2018. Yeah, that's right when I was marching into that doctoral program. Lois's main mission in life is to help both her public health and grief recovery method colleagues realize how related their work is, believing that grief is a huge, largely unaddressed public health issue, and that the grief recovery method and our other programs provide the much needed tools to help ease our grief and therefore many of our public health ills. Lois has a master's in preventative medicine from the, the Ohio State University. She also has a wonderful husband and 3 amazing adult children and 2 brilliant grandchildren, and a grand dog and 3 grand cats. That being said, welcome, Lois. Welcome.
Good to be back. Good to be back.
Yes, yes. So we're just going to have a very easy conversation this evening. And let's start just talking about our topic, the significant changes, navigating the losses and these big changes in our times. So Lois, let's just kick it about and I'll let you go first.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Thank you, Marilyn, for the invitation, first of all. And I am still a grief recovery method specialist, as hopefully all of you know by now. I no longer work for the Institute. I was a 40-hour-a-week employee for them until December 4th of last year. But that's okay. I'm still a grief recovery method specialist. I still love, 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 love the program. And I was telling Marilyn and Brenda earlier, it just gives me more time to do my grief recovery work here locally. So all is well, all is well. Yeah, change, navigating change. I have no idea what's happening in your lives for those of you who have tuned in. But I get a lot of questions. I still also kind of dabble in public health a little bit. And I get a lot of questions from people who just say, I just feel like I don't even want to watch the news. What's going to happen tomorrow, right? And it seems like every aspect or many aspects of our lives, there are changes, right? So in public health, there was a day a couple weeks ago where public health agencies got an email on that date, and it said that as of midnight that night, their grants were gone, right? So imagine and imagine that change. Now, a lot of you, whatever your profession is, whether it's counseling or coaching or clergy or education, your life is invested in your profession and your work. And so when they got this notice that their grant was just being pulled out from under their feet, right? Well, who am I? What am I going to do? What about my clients? What about my public, my community? And so people have been asking, how do I deal with that? How do I manage that? And so it's, public health has had changes. Education is going through changes. Practically every one of our federal agencies, even libraries and the national parks, for goodness sakes, they're going through changes. And religion is going through changes. I'm a United Methodist, and we've just recently had a big schism in our church, not related to the political scene, but lots of changes in our lives. How do we deal with that? Not to mention, we came into these changes with that backpack. A lot of you remember from your training that story about we all have little backpacks, right? So all the deaths that we've experienced, the other job losses, the financial losses, the health changes, the estrangements, the kids who moved out of the house and you're an empty nester. I mean, we came into this time of current change already being grievers. And so this change is just added on top. And I think a lot of people, probably not those of you on this call, but to a lot of the people out there, our public, our potential clients, they don't know why they feel so weird, why they feel so anxious and so tense and so nervous and so angry and so confused, right? It's grief. It's just grief. It's grief on top of grief on top of grief. As
Yes.
as an epidemiologist, I tell people 100% of us are grievers, 100%. And we came into this time of change already as grievers with heavy backpacks. So that's what brings me to this topic. And again, connecting the grief recovery work to public health and other fields as well.
Yes. And Lois, so everyone tuning in is not a grief recovery method specialist. So can you just share a little bit more about the backpack you're speaking
Yeah,
of to our audience?
absolutely. So in the grief recovery program, we talk about the fact that, again, 100% of us are grievers. And they talk about the fact that grief really starts when you're born. I tell people it's when you come through that chute and they smack your butt and you cry, right? You're not in that warm, cushy place anymore. And the picture that we describe is, imagine if when you're born, you come out with a brand new little empty backpack, right? And nobody teaches us how to deal with grief. They tell us to, sit down and shut up. I'll fix it. It'll be okay. Don't feel bad. We'll just get you another one. Eat something, you'll feel better, right? And so children learn very early on not to talk about their grief. So imagine if every time there's a change or a loss, it's like a little rock or a stone or a pebble, and they just pick it up and put it in the backpack, right? Every time there's a change or a loss, imagine from childhood forward. And as you get older, those little rocks and pebbles turn into be golf ball size or grapefruit size or basketball size. When you lose your job, your spouse dies, a child dies. And so eventually our backpack gets full and gets heavy, and it just kind of weighs us down. And so that's the backpack analogy, is that nobody teaches us. In fact, they teach us incorrect ways to deal with grief more than correct ones. And so we just put them in our backpack and stuff it down, and it weighs us down. And again, for me, that's part of why it's a public health issue. We got a lot of people walking around with very heavy backpacks, and it impacts their health, it impacts their habits, their behaviors, their relationships. And so that's the backpack story.
And you know what? We don't realize it in the grief recovery method. That we learned how to gain things. We learned to get a job, a car, a house, an education, a boo. We learned how to acquire a vacation, but we don't learn how to lose things. And the universality of that, it's not just maybe us here in the US, it's worldwide. So the grief recovery method is evidence-based and is globally practiced. And there are grief recovery method specialists all over the world. We can reach out to someone in London, in Mexico, in Australia, or Canada. And I've collaborated or connected with specialists in other places in the world. I had the opportunity, I was actually in Mexico and spending some time with some extended family, and was able to connect with Arturo, right? Arturo in Mexico City. And in 2 days, he was able to ship me books in Spanish so I could share those books with the Helping Children Lost books in Spanish with extended family in Mexico. Now, Lois, you just spoke a minute ago about sit down and shut up, which many of us have heard when we were growing up, or stop crying. I'll give you something to cry about. Go
Yep.
to the other room. So that's myth. So let's talk about the myths, the 6 myths of the grief recovery method.
Okay. They are: don't feel bad, replace the loss, keep busy, it just takes time, grieve alone, and what's the sixth one?
Place the loss.
I thought I said replace the loss.
Oh, did
There
you?
are 6 of them. They're on page
And keep
35 of
be
the book.
strong.
Be strong. How could I forget? Be strong. Absolutely. And so those are the 6 kind of basic common myths that John and Russell found were common all around the planet. There are more probably things that people hear or are told, but those 6 seem to be pretty universal around the world. And so the sit down and shut up is kind of a version of don't talk about it, right? Don't talk about it. Or don't you cry, or I'll give you something to cry about. Don't talk about it. Stuff it inside. And so that's one of the first ones. And again, you talked just briefly about ACEs, the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. I have a huge place in my heart for children because, again, they start collecting those rocks in the backpack very early, very early.
Yes.
And at first, they don't even have a vocabulary to describe what they're feeling or what's happening. And then when they get a vocabulary, they don't have the ability to articulate their feelings and put together sentences. And by the time they're able to put together sentences, that's when big people, sometimes well-meaning, tell them to sit down and shut up. I'll fix it. It won't be that bad. Don't bother me. It'll be okay, right? And so when we address a child in that way, even if we don't say sit down and shut up, even if we're well-meaning, don't worry about it, sweetheart. Mommy will take care of it, right? Or it won't be that bad. That just causes that child to shrink inside themselves because they have not been heard. And so don't feel bad is kind of one of those universal early on myths. Replacing the loss, again, we teach this to our children. If they lose something, my sons used to have Matchbox cars and they would go under the refrigerator. Well, I'm not going in after them. Heaven knows what's under the refrigerator. We'll just get you another one on Saturday. You could go to the grocery store and pick in the box or in the bin and get another Matchbox car for $1, right? Replace the loss. We tell young people that too when they have their first puppy love. Well, don't worry about it. There are more fish in the sea. She wasn't good enough for you anyway. You'll get somebody else. They weren't the right one. Replace the loss. So Marilyn is absolutely correct. We're not taught how to lose things. I tell people too, I bet we're the only culture on the planet that has a whole industry of these you lock, we store businesses, right? We get so much stuff that we actually pay good money every month to put it in a building that we never even go to visit it. But that's our stuff, right?
And you know
And
what? Excuse me, Lois, when you're talking about stuff, have you noticed that there has been a boom? There's been a boom of stuff that these storage places. I was like, where are they? There are a lot of people putting their stuff away. And
yeah,
some of the stuff is they've had a loss, they've lost a job, but also recognizing that we have so much stuff
exactly. I
and
think you're
where to
right.
put it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think as people are losing jobs or their jobs are changing, maybe they have to downsize their house. Maybe they become homeless. And so they've got to store their stuff someplace. I think that is a part of it. And I think the other is we just collect stuff and it's hard to get rid of it. I cannot watch. There are hoarding shows on TV if you've ever or on the internet. I can't watch them because if they ask somebody, well, why are you so invested in these model cars, or why are you so invested in cuckoo clocks or whatever it happens? Well, my grandmother was the one who turned, it's like, oh, your grandmother. And so they're probably not done with the grief of losing the grandmother, that they've got this stuff. The other thing I think about the stuff is when the world seems so out of control, we grab at anything we can to be in control. And so one of the things that we do sometimes is we buy stuff. We think that if we've got that little credit card 24/7, 365 on the internet, as long as I can buy stuff, I'm in control, right? And it's a false sense of control. But now we've got this stuff. And we may have on the list here later to talk about STIRBs, short-term energy relieving behaviors. But this idea
Yes.
of buying and accumulating stuff, they call it humorously retail therapy, right? But there are people for whom getting that stuff is in control. If they've lost something over here, getting something over here gives them that illusion that they're in control when
And
life is
making
in
them
out of
feel
control.
better. They have
It
to,
makes them feel better
it makes them feel better temporarily.
temporarily.
And, I remember a time that, and this is before the grief recovery method, that I was really having a difficult time in a relationship. And my to replace the loss or just deal with the pain of being in the relationship, I was always on a vacation, going on a cruise ship, so every 3 to 4 months to make myself feel better. But at the
Mm-hmm.
end of the day, I had to come back home.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah,
another myth is replace the loss, but keep busy.
yeah,
Um, do this, do that. You
yeah,
know, uh, if you stop, when you're still, and you have to be present to feel the pain and discomfort, to be in touch with it.
yeah.
But a lot of times we're like hamsters on a wheel.
Absolutely. And that's also exhausting, isn't
Mm-hmm.
it? It's exhausting, this keeping busy stuff. And the grief doesn't go away just because you're ignoring it. The grief doesn't go away just because you're doing something else, and I think that's what people are afraid of, that if I sit down and am still and am in the moment, what happens then? What if I get depressed? What if I cry? What if I'm sad? What if I'm lonely? What if I'm isolated? Well, I better just keep busy so that that doesn't happen. But like you said, you've got to go through that pain. You've got to deal with it, or it's going to keep coming back up to bite you eventually.
And another myth, for example, being a Black woman, I'm often, I've been told in the past, oh, you're a strong Black woman. And being strong for everybody, being present for everybody and everything. No wonder that a lot of Black women have
Mm,
a lot of health issues, hypertension, issues with cancer. But we're not alone, just women in general. Oftentimes we're working outside of the home, and then
hmm
we come back and we're responsible for Scientific America said that we're responsible for 80% of duties in the home, in addition
Yeah,
to working outside
yeah.
of the home.
If some of you are old enough to remember, I think it was Helen Reddy, right, who did the song "I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar," right? And that was a song kind of encouraging women to be strong. Think about how strong you are. For me, this idea of being strong, first of all, it's not true, right? We're not strong. It's a false security. It's fake, and it doesn't work, right? If there's a 50-gallon bucket out here in the middle of the floor, come on, Marilyn, pick it up, girl. I'm being strong for you. Pick it up, pick it up. I'm being strong. You cannot be strong for somebody else. You can't. What works is if we pick it up together. So, the Boston Marathon was just earlier this week. And the first time I remember the whole be strong thing was Boston Strong after the marathon bombing, Boston Strong, right? Well, it doesn't work. Being strong for somebody else doesn't work. Getting in there together. I wish it had been Boston Together, right? We had a couple police officers who were killed in the line of duty in Westerville, where I live, a few years ago. And of course, it was Westerville Strong. I wish it had been Westerville Together. When there's a tragedy or there's some sort of a community loss, I wish it was together, not be strong. And Marilyn, maybe you're the one who's going to start the movement, Black Women Together, right? Instead of strong Black women, let's be Black women together. Woo, think about what we could do together.
Well, let me tell you, there are a lot of organizations out there on the forefront and taking care of all of that. I'm a supporter. But
Mm-hmm.
when you mention being strong, not being strong, but us being together and being in community, another myth is grieve alone, that people learn to isolate themselves. When we talked about early, bam, when we used to get spankings, right? Uh, be quiet or go in a room, go away. I'll give you something to cry about. And being isolated and put away. And even though sometimes in the body of faith, I've witnessed in churches where individuals are crying and it's an effort to comfort the person, but they'll take them and escort them out. And
Yeah.
the issue is that we do not learn the language, the body language. We don't learn how to support people who are grieving. We don't know what to say.
Right. How to
And
sit
so
with it.
when they're equipped with the tools, we no longer need to isolate people. And oftentimes we are frequently uncomfortable with that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had people say, okay. I'll start tearing up. I'm on the phone and they're like, okay. But it's a normal and natural response to loss or change of any type, and
Yeah.
just to be present. The other myth is, oh, it just takes time.
Yeah, I'm a biology major, and so I use a lot of biological examples. If I broke my leg, somebody may say, well, you just go sit over there on the couch. It'll heal itself. You just go sit there. It'll take care of itself. And yeah, it probably would, right? But the bone probably would not heal correctly. And I'd sit there so long waiting for it to heal that my muscles would atrophy. And then I would get so used to the TV tuner that I wouldn't even want to get up and walk anymore, right? So what happens with time is it's not the element of the length of time, but it's what you do in that time. Again, with the broken leg, if I go to the doctor, he sets the bone, I wear the cast, I wear the boot, I go to physical therapy, I actually do the exercises. That's what's going to bring my recovery is the proper correct activities that I do during that time. And so in the grief recovery issue, it's what do we do with that time? And that's what I love about this method is it gives us tools to use, to do, to go through that time that helps us get to the point of recovery. So it's not just sitting there waiting for the boo-hoo-hoo to stop. It's to take the appropriate actions. It's the subtitle is the action program for moving beyond death, divorce, and other losses. And so that's what the process is about too. Is what not the time element, but what should I do in that time to help make that recovery faster, more complete. And I want to point out too that grief recovery doesn't mean you need to forget the person or whatever the situation was, doesn't mean you love them any less, right? And I take that back to a biological example. My dad broke his leg at one point, and they had to put metal rods in his leg. He always had a visible scar where that happened, right? And so in the grief analogy, when you go to Mother's Day or Father's Day dinner and mom isn't there, that empty chair is going to be a visible reminder, right? Just like the scar was on my dad's leg, a visible reminder that something has changed. Likewise, when the weather got a little bit stormy, dad's leg would ache from that broken leg that he had. It would just ache a little. And so again, in the grief analogy, when life gets a little stormy for us, when we're going through whatever it is we're going through, and I just want to have my mom on the phone and talk with her about, how would you do this or how would this work or can you help me or just have her arms around me, right? That when life gets a little stormy and that person isn't there, our heart may ache a little more. So the whole idea of taking time and what to do in the time, there are healthy ways that we can work through that recovery. And that's to me what the method is about.
And when we're talking about healthy ways, there are a couple of things I want to address. One is STIRBs. That's an unhealthy way. But also, you mentioned Mother's Day or Father's Day. So we want to talk about special holidays as well. So let's start with STIRPs, short-term energy relieving behaviors. And you alluded to that earlier on with a broken heart, puppy love, and oh, get another one. You can always get another one. Even when we're looking at it and the aspect of public health, some people eat um, in abundance. Some people drink in abundance. Some people participate in recreational drugs. And those things, you mentioned shopping. So all of those can have a negative impact. So let's talk a little bit about STIRPs.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and stirbs aren't always bad. So it's not that you do them. We all do. We all have things, right? Mine are
Mm-hmm,
food and
mm-hmm.
sleep and work. Work has been a stirb. But the point is, it's how and when and why we use them, and if we're using them to numb out or to distract us from the grief. And there's so many. There's such a thing. We could do a whole hour just on stirbs. Um, and we use them. And in public health, I tell people we have a pamphlet and a brochure and a program for all of them. We've got an obesity program, a smoking program, an alcohol program, but we're not making a difference with those until we get to the heart of the matter. And that's the grief that sets us up to want and need those short-term energy relieving behaviors. So there's a question. I don't know if Julia is letting you know. There's a question in the chat there, Marilyn. I don't know if you want to address that
Okay,
now or
let me
wait till
see.
the end.
Let me just check. The other thing I just wanted to for you to discuss a bit about is the holidays and those special
Yep.
days that come up and impact us.
Yep. I talk to people about we need to kind of meet those head on. We know they're going to happen. You know those holidays are coming. So plan ahead. How do you plan to spend that day? What can you do? If it's going to be a tough day on Mother's Day, what can you do to plan for that day to make it a more meaningful, pleasant? I don't want to say happy necessarily, but a meaningful, pleasant way to spend that day. Maybe it's going someplace that you and your mother used to go to. Maybe it's going out to sit by the water somewhere. Maybe it's going to a religious service. Maybe it's something like making mom's favorite dish. Maybe it's having people over for a celebration. And I also tell them to tell the stories. Everybody's going to be pretending like, oh, let's not talk about mom. That'll make everybody cry and be sad. No, it won't. If you start telling the stories, you're probably going to have as many stories where people will end up laughing, right, about all the good times they had. You might laugh till you cry and cry till you laugh. But by telling the stories and giving it voice, it helps get it out. It makes it real. We're not hiding anything. We're not stuffing anything. And I think we as the griever need to lead that movement, right? People say, "Oh my gosh, well how do we start that?" Well, when you're together, don't ignore it. Talk about it. Here's what mom and I used to do, or here's what dad and I used to enjoy doing. What did you enjoy about working with dad, or what did you enjoy doing with mom? Ask them the questions, and they'll start to tell you the stories. And simply by giving it voice and telling the stories, it takes some of that awkwardness away.
Yeah, and it's so important that we amplify the voices of grievers. Thus, the name of my company, Your Voice Heard, is to
Yeah,
amplify the voices of grievers because they are so often silenced. Now, loss can and change can significantly change your worldview and perspective. Now, when I first connected with you and you were telling me about Folletti's study and and ACEs, adverse childhood experience, and the the model of trauma informed is built on that. That's 25 years in plus and a little bit more than 25 years in the making. However, the grief recovery method has been in practice for over 40 years. Now,
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that is most significant and a visual demonstration that you showed me, which I found very impactful, is showing that this is trauma, a traumatic event, a change in life. It doesn't have to be an ACE. It could be any type of loss. It could be a move. And grief is the response and what is lingering. And we don't learn how
Right.
to deal with the grief and the loss. But we also, society does not recognize the fact that it's interconnected, and those
Absolutely.
physical, intellectual, emotional, social impacts that trauma has on an individual, they're integrated, and those are the similar responses that occur with grief.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it doesn't matter the loss or the change. It could be
Right.
it could be being in a natural disaster, losing your
Absolutely.
house. There's been so much in our country, so many natural disasters, and the job loss, and people losing their health care, and now
Yeah.
their health is being impacted. So, being very much aware of our community, everyone that's around us,
Right.
and those who haven't even. So, for example, I know people who are working with the federal government. My mom was a federal government worker, and the anticipation that at any moment you will lose your job. What does that look like for you financially?
Right.
What does it mean for your family? But one of, for me, my particular loss that I dealt with, which got me to the grief recovery method, was I was working in schools as a school nurse. School nurse knew everybody's business, everybody's business. But when I was reading IEPs, 504 plans, psychosocial evaluations, and I was being triggered. I was like, oh, that's me. Oh, that's me. Yeah, I had at least 7 of 10 adverse childhood experiences. So connecting the dots, and I realized what was going on with me. I got connected with the grief recovery method, totally changed my practice,
Right.
how I navigate it. Oh, thank you. Oh, I'm blushing here. Sharon said I was a good nurse. Thank you, Sharon.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that was those losses were the impetus for me, to help grievers. And
Right.
sometimes your loss or your significant life change can create your purpose, something
Well,
to do in your life. And thank you,
it
Jessica.
it can create your purpose, but it can also hold you back sometimes,
Yes,
right? This
yes.
this idea that the trauma is what happens, grief is what lingers, right?
Mhm.
They're two sides of the same coin. And so all of the talk about trauma informed care, that's great. Trauma informed care is great, but it's only part of the story. You were stimulated or activated in reading those stories about the children because you had not dealt with the grief part. And so every time you heard another story, it reminded you of it. There was a tornado in Ohio about a year ago and killed 2 or 3 people, and devastation, right? Houses were lost, businesses were lost. And the health commissioner there told me the story that every time, even now, every time the tornado siren goes off, people are like this, right? Because it reminds them of that night. And so we've done some work in that community around the grief of the tornado. And I've encouraged the health commissioner too, the annual, the reminder of the date, whatever the date of the event was, that can also bring up those feelings. If it's a death of somebody, the day they died, or it would have been your 50th wedding anniversary, those special dates also bring those feelings up. So if you haven't dealt with the grief part of this story, that's what comes up to bite you in the butt later. And even with those children, they've experienced those ACEs even as little ones. And so when they act out in school, or they get in trouble, or they're morose, or they're isolating, I hope you were, and I'll bet you were, that school nurse who sat down and figured out what's going on. What's the grief part here? I see in this report what the trauma was. Tell me how you're doing with it. Tell me what the feelings are. Let me help you unravel those feelings.
Yes, absolutely. And even with the staff, the administrators were in the
Oh, yes, absolutely.
they were in the health room, and uh, I knew when staff were going to call out. I knew
Yep.
why staff were calling out.
Yeah.
And there are times not only in schools, but in the
Any job.
workplace.
Yep.
Deloitte had a study in 2019 which revealed that there was a $5 return on investment for every dollar that was spent on mental health and well-being programs. And so I recognize that the grief that people are experiencing, and they're bringing themselves in the workplace. They're not bringing their best selves in the workplace.
Exactly.
They're preoccupied. Harvard Business Review speaks on presenteeism. You're just showing up, but you're not being productive. And it
Exactly.
impacts work culture, the climate as
Absolutely.
well.
Absolutely. Well, after the 911, no, it was Oklahoma City, which again was just an anniversary of that this week too. After the Oklahoma City bombing that happened in a federal building, right? 1 year later, the news was starting to talk about it being the anniversary. Well, my office was in a building that was adjacent to the federal building here in Columbus, and in fact had windows on my side of the building that faced the windows on that one. And I had not really dealt with the grief of what would it be like to be in that kind of a bombing. And I asked my supervisor, I said, I'd like to take this day off. First of all, I also wanted to stay home and honor and remember and be a part of whatever the ceremonies were going to be on TV. But there was a part of me that was scared to be there because I was adjacent to a federal building. What if somebody came and parked their truck in the alley? And so you're right, it goes to work. And of course he poo-pooed it away and said, no, that's just silly, that's just stupid, that won't happen, which is another way of saying don't feel bad, by the way, right? And so I took the day off anyway, took it as a day of vacation. But you're right, it happens in the workplace, and not only in this presenteeism or absenteeism, but people lose their focus, and that's when they start making mistakes on the job. When a nurse puts the wrong amount of medication in a syringe, or we had a person who was driving the shuttle bus at one of the hospitals here, 15 miles an hour for the shuttle bus from the parking lot to the hospital, right? He ran over two people in the crosswalk. What was he thinking about, right?
Yeah.
What was going on in his mind that he didn't see those people in the crosswalk? And we've all probably driven someplace and get there and realize, I don't remember a thing I saw.
Yeah.
Right? What was I thinking about? So it affects us in many subtle ways, in school, in work, in just our life, Grief, the lifelong impact of grief is amazing. It's just monumental.
And just one more point before we start our wrap up. Unrealized hopes, dreams, and expectations. Let's talk about that and how its relationship to grief.
Oh, absolutely. I think those are powerful. And for me, when I first read the Grief Recovery Handbook, that was a light bulb moment. John James talks in the book about how he and his wife were expecting a baby, and they knew it was going to be a little boy. And John and his dad didn't have a real good relationship. His dad used to hit him a little, he says. But John knew that when this little boy was born, he wanted to be a better dad to his son than his dad had been to him. So he had hopes and dreams and expectations. He was going to teach him to play ball. He was going to go to every ball game. He was going to teach him how to shave. He was going to go at his wedding, and all those hopes and dreams and expectations. So when the baby died 3 days after it was born, not only did he lose the baby, he lost the hopes and dreams and expectations. And again, we don't typically articulate those ahead of time. We have them, they're within us, hopes and dreams and expectation of what retirement is going to be like, or what marriage is going to be like, or what anything, a new job is going to be like. But we don't take the time to articulate those in our hearts. And so we don't even really know what they are until they're gone. And then we start thinking about, oh, well, now I can't do this. Now I won't do this. Oh, this is different than what I'd expected. And so for me, that's a huge piece too of this grief recovery program, is that we've got the incident that happened, whatever the traumatic event was, but what are the other hopes and dreams and expectations that surround it? That those are losses too. Those are absolutely losses as well, but they're intangible losses, we call them. They're not things you can see, hear, taste, touch, or smell. They're intangible losses, but they're powerful. And again, if we can't articulate them, how could I describe my unmet hope and dream and expectation to somebody else? Infertility, miscarriage, other pregnancy related things, hopes and dreams and expectations. I have a place in my heart for women who continue to have miscarriages, or IVF doesn't work time and time and time again. They get their hopes up and then they're dashed. They get their hopes up and then they're dashed. Those hopes and dreams and expectations are huge losses, but society doesn't usually recognize them or talk about them.
And with unrealized hopes, dreams, and expectations, in my work as an adjunct professor, as a dissertation advisor or chair, I have a passion. I love working with the students who come into the program that are ABD, because they have an unrealized hope, dream, and expectation that they didn't finish their program. And
right.
They're just really, they have a desire for it. And I really tap into that grief piece with them. They don't realize it. Sometimes I say it, but I really want to continue to work with them so that they can realize their hope, dream, expectations. So they're no longer in that particular grief cycle.
They've got a lot invested, don't they?
Yeah,
Marilyn? They've got not just the money invested, but the time, the heart, the work, the soul. And you took me back with that example. I remember when I was getting my master's degree and I took my thesis in back in the day. You had to take a paper copy, right? And you give it to the lady with the ruler, and she looks at it and, oh, my margins were off. What do you mean? I need to turn it in today or I won't get my degree, So you took me back. I don't know if they still manage margins or not, but mine were just slightly off according to her ruler. So my hope and dream and expectation that by turning in this dissertation, I would be done. Nope, I wasn't done. Again, this kind of elastic string. Nope, go back and do it again. Oh, Marilyn, you're going to have to therapy me on that. I'm going to have to write a grief recovery completion statement to that person at the graduate office.
Oh my goodness. Well, we're coming close to our end. Lois, I would love for you to share your information so that everyone would know how to connect with you.
Yep. Well, the first way is on the Grief Recovery Method website. In that directory, I always send people to About Us, right? And you put in Columbus, Ohio, down at the bottom, and there will be several of us who come up with Columbus, Ohio. And so you can find me there, and there's a way to email me. My phone number is there. And so that would be the best way. My old griefrecoverymethod.com email address is no longer the preferred one. So it is lhall.eachmatters@gmail.com is my preferred email now. And my phone number is 614-620-3664. And even though I don't work for the Grief Recovery Institute, I am a grief recovery method specialist till the day I die and probably after that. And so you can certainly call or email if you have questions. I may send them on to the Institute because I don't have access to all the behind the scenes information anymore. I am also available if anybody would like some mentoring. Just like Sandy Derby does the marketing coaching, it's separate. It's a separate thing, and you pay Sandy for that marketing coaching. If anybody would like to do some grief recovery mentoring, we can set up some sessions for that. Or if you have more of your own personal work that you'd like to do, I would be glad to be your heart with ears and walk you through the alumni program. Or if you'd like to work on an intangible loss. So I am absolutely indeed taking clients and still working with the grief recovery method. I love it, love it, love it till the day I die.
Uh, yeah, you and I both. And Jalea has put your contact
Thank you.
information in the chat. And if you want to get in contact with me, you can go to my website is, Jalea's putting it all in the chat.
She's a
You
quick one.
are voiceheard.com. That's the website. This video will be eventually be on the website in the video section. Also, it'll be, I have a YouTube channel. I didn't do this for YouTube, but I can have it uploaded onto the YouTube channel. And in addition, there's information. You can contact me on Instagram, Your Voice Heard LLC, and the Facebook page, Your Voice Heard LLC. And with that being said, I just really appreciate you all tuning in. Once again, our apologies that we couldn't get it on Facebook, but we'll do that another time when we get it squared away. And I think we're planning on focusing primarily on children because children are often silenced, and we want to give adults, it doesn't have to be your child. It could be your niece, nephew. It could be your student, your grandchild. You may be babysitting. You may be a coach. But all of us have a touch point with children.
Absolutely.
So once again, thank you and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thanks, Marilyn. Thank you to those who joined us.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye.